Today I am going to explain the process of selecting a staff of orientation advisors, or OAs, for a new student orientation program at a local university. The program is aimed at orienting members of the class of 2012 in the fall of 2008, so the staff of upperclassmen leaders needed to be chosen during the spring semester of 2008. Before we continue, I would like to give permission to my instructor to post this presentation on the web. The customer's voice for this project is actually twofold. As a coordinator of the program, I am, in a sense, a customer, because I need the assistance of the orientation advisors to help me run my program smoothly. Another major customer is the incoming class, who will rely on the staff of advisors to guide them through their first few days on campus. This is a quote from myself. As you can see, I am a coordinator for the program and have 4 other coordinators working with me, but we alone could not lead the entire incoming class of 1,800 students, so we are in need of a large staff. I talked to a student who is going to be a freshman in college next fall and got this quote. While he doesn't specifically refer to the term orientation advisor, what he says he is looking for is exactly the role an orientation advisor will play for new students, so I would consider this a customer as well. The estimates I used when planning this project should be considered reliable because I met with 2 expert sources. These sources can be considered experts because they completed a very similar staff selection for last year's orientation. The first expert source is last year's NSO coordinator team. Shortly after my team was chosen to begin our term, they met with us during a transition dinner and gave estimates on how long each task would take. Also, the staff director of NSO was involved with the planning last year, and as such, was able to serve as an excellent resource for helping to estimate how long the entire staff selection project would take. The estimate process was used to estimate the project's length. Initially, my team and I guessed that the project would last about 3 months. After consulting with our 2 sources, they said the project could be completed in 2 months. However, since I had other commitments such as school and work, and I knew I couldn't be doing this project 100% of the time, our final estimates guessed that this project would take just under 2.5 months. Here is a screenshot from the project management software of all the major tasks collapsed. As you can see by looking at line 1, the entire project was scheduled to last just under 2.5 months, from Friday, February 8th until Friday, April 18th. This slide shows screenshots from the project management software of the entire list of activities for this project. The main activities include creating an application, making on-campus space reservations, distributing applications, contacting abroad applicants, collecting applications, conducting interviews, maintaining a database, selecting the staff, notifying applicants of our decision, and finalizing the staff. The goal of the first 4 tasks is to accomplish the preliminary requirements of this project. These tasks are shown here with the corresponding section of the Gantt chart. In these first steps, I had to create the application and make sure it was distributed to everyone who was interested in applying. This slide shows a picture of the actual application that was created for my project. The applicant was asked to fill out the information on the lines, provide a picture, and then attach their answers to the 4 questions. In all, over 350 applications were received for 180 openings. Returning to the activities list, the next set of tasks was the real meat of this project. Again, the corresponding section of the Gantt chart is shown next to the listed activities. After the initial legwork had been done to create and distribute applications, the applications needed to be collected, applicants had to be interviewed, and finally a day was set aside for which the staff would be chosen. The interview process was by far the longest task for this project, as it took a significant amount of time to interview the 350 applicants. It is interesting to note that Task 33, labeled Pick 180 Advisors and 10 Alternates, is the task in which the stated goal of the project seems to be addressed, yet there are so many tasks leading to that point, and there are several tasks to be accomplished afterwards as well. This slide shows the last 2 major tasks and their subtasks, as well as the corresponding section of the Gantt chart. These were the wrap-up tasks for the project. Once the actual day of staff selection occurred, these tasks needed to be completed before we could officially set our final. This slide shows the critical path for the first 6 tasks highlighted in red on the Gantt chart. This slide shows the remainder of the critical path. The total duration of my project, according to my project management software, was 51 days. However, I worked on the project 5 days per week, so the actual start to finish date was slightly longer. Between February 8th and April 18th, there were 70 days. Therefore, the first third of this project is what was accomplished within the first 23 days. This brings us to March 2nd, the day before the interviews were scheduled to begin. At that point, everything had gone quite smoothly, and I had not encountered any project delays. This slide, as well as the next two, show the information from the status report at 1/3 of the way through the At this point, there were no late tasks, and the only task which is scheduled to be completed in March is the database maintenance. The interviews were scheduled to begin on the same day as the database, but would not be completed until April, so they did not belong on this slide, or in this chart. This slide shows the section of the status report that outlines the tasks scheduled to start next. At this point, the only issue I saw was that completing the interviews on time would be difficult. As far as logistical concerns, the last several tasks were at a standstill until the interview process was completed, so there was no way to shorten the overall project length by moving them forward. This slide shows the tracking Gantt chart when the project was 1/3 of the way finished. Because task 22, which is labeled interviews, was such a lengthy task, it would appear at first glance that very little had been accomplished by 2/3 of the way through the project since the last status report. However, quite a bit of progress had indeed been made, because task 25, a subtask of 22, was now about 75% complete. This was by far the longest task of my project, so the progress was significant, even though it may not seem so simply by looking at the two status reports. This slide and the next two show the 2/3 status report component. There were no late tasks at the 2/3 progress update because the interviews were moving along quite well. Also, nothing was scheduled to be completed by the end of March, so both of these charts were empty for this. These are the next set of tasks to be started after the completion of the interviews. Because the interviews were taking so long, the issues in the logistics sections in the 2/3 status report were the same as the 1/3. This is the tracking Gantt chart of the 2/3 progress. Database maintenance was completed, but the actual interviews were only about 75% complete at this point, and the project could not move ahead until they were completed. Fortunately, I did not encounter any delays during my project. This is probably unusual, but I think it is because the project is done every year at this time, so my expert sources gave me a great idea of how to plan, and I also set strict deadlines for both myself and applicants. On April 15th, when the final approval was received from school staff persons, this project was officially closed. Having completed the staff selection, I am now in a position to spend the summer planning specific orientation events for August 2008. I learned from this project that planning ahead really helps. The task at first seems quite simple, but using the software forced me to look at all the aspects necessary to planning and proved quite beneficial. Additionally, I realized the importance of setting and following strict deadlines. As mentioned in the last slide, I was actually able to complete this project without any delays because 1. My expert sources gave me a very good idea of how much time to allot to the project, and 2. Most importantly, I set the deadlines for both myself and the applicants and followed and enforced them strictly. This project also taught me better organizational skills, as using the project management software allowed me to look at the project from the big picture. My people skills improved through my many interactions with others during the process as well. This has been my presentation on how I successfully went about selecting a staff of orientation advisors for New Student Orientation 2008. Thank you for listening.